In a small rural village, Ao Puang grew up with calloused hands, yet her heart was always full of warmth. She was a simple, gentle girl, grounded by the values of love and sincerity. Her family wasn't wealthy, but it was rich in love and resilience. Though orphaned at a young age, Ao Puang faced life with courage, knowing that the road ahead would be difficult. As the eldest child, Ao Puang assumed the responsibility of raising her three younger siblings. Despite their struggles, her love for her family remained unwavering. Even after she married, her modest home and humble circumstances did not deter her. From early morning until late evening, Ao Puang worked tirelessly alongside her husband, tending to the fields. Their meals were simple, boiled vegetables with a splash of fish sauce. But their laughter filled the air, and in those moments, all their struggles seemed to fade away. A year after their wedding, the greatest joy arrived: their first daughter. She brought light into their lives and completed their small family. But just as they had found happiness, life took an unexpected turn. Ao Puang's husband began to complain of frequent back pain. At first, he thought it was simply fatigue from the hard labor in the fields, but soon, the pain grew more intense and unbearable. One hot afternoon, Ao Puang heard a desperate cry coming from the field. Rushing out, she found her husband collapsed in the middle of the rice paddies. His face was pale, drenched in sweat. Panicked, Ao Puang ran to him, her hands trembling as she helped him up. She cried out for help, and their neighbors quickly came to assist, carrying him back home. Without hesitation, Ao Puang took him to the local hospital. There, the doctor's words were a blow. His condition was too serious for their small facility. He needed immediate transfer to a larger hospital. Desperate to save him, Ao Puang began searching for money, knocking on doors of relatives and borrowing from friends in the village. Through the kindness of her uncle, they managed to gather enough funds to transfer him to a better hospital. But fate was cruel. The test results came back, and they were devastating. Her husband was diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. The news hit Ao Puang like a thunderclap, leaving her numb. Not only did this terrible disease push their family into an even darker place, but it also placed an immense burden on her husband's heart. On his hospital bed, he looked at her with eyes filled with sorrow. He whispered words that tore at her heart. "I'm sorry I couldn't be there. Don't try too hard. If it gets too difficult, think of your own life." Ao Puang's heart ached as tears filled her eyes. She couldn't fathom leaving him, not after everything they had been through together. How could she turn away from him? Love, it seemed, could not even prevent the cruel separation of death. When he passed, the sky wept. Ao Puang stood in the rain, her cries mingling with the downpour, the weight of grief pressing down on her chest. The rain seemed as heavy as the sorrow in her heart, a silent scream echoing in the empty spaces of her soul. At the funeral, Ao Puang looked at her three brothers-in-law, standing silently at the altar. Their faces, once full of youth, were now etched with the burden of loss. Ao Puang's heart shattered as she realized the eternal separation from her beloved. His departure left a void, but his last words, his final entrusted wishes, lingered in her heart. She stood there in the pouring rain, holding their daughter, knowing that love would never fade, even in the face of death. In a moment that would forever be engraved in her heart, she realized something that would change everything. She was not just her daughter's mother anymore. She had become her only support. For her three younger brothers-in-law, this was a heavy burden. But for her husband, It was the only way she could repay his love and devotion. After his death, the wife's life became a long series of challenges, each day darker than the last. The pain of losing her husband hadn't yet faded. She was still grieving, yet she had no choice but to face the harsh reality of raising a young child while caring for her elderly father. Her image in the village was that of a thin woman, working tirelessly from dawn till dusk in the fields. From the time the rooster crowed in the morning to when the sun set in the evening, she was out there, struggling to make ends meet. Huang woke early every morning to stoke the fire and cook a simple breakfast for her children before heading out to work. Her youngest, still less than 2 years old, would cling to her leg and cry, not wanting to be left behind. But Huang had no choice. She would tie her child to her back and take her to the fields, finding small moments to care for her during breaks. At times, she would lay her daughter on a small mat under the shade of trees by the field. There, the child would play with makeshift toys fashioned from bamboo. Despite the difficulty of the work in the fields, it now seemed even heavier as she carried the additional responsibility of raising her children and supporting her brothers-in-law. Each rice plant she sowed felt like an act of quiet defiance, her calloused hands pushing forward, unwilling to stop, driven by a promise she made long ago. Standing before her husband's altar, Huang would swallow her tears and tell herself to be stronger. By the time the sun set, she returned home, exhausted but still determined. This was when she would cook dinner and help her children with their studies. Then, she would collapse into bed, often falling asleep beside them. The dark circles under her eyes, a testament to her sleepless nights. With the family's constant lack of food and money, Huang became even thinner, working tirelessly to cover school fees for her children. To support her younger siblings, Huang was forced to sell what little they had, every grain of rice, every chicken in the coop. On top of that, she sometimes took on odd jobs around the village just to make ends meet. Despite the small amount of money she earned, Huang never complained, but everyone could see that she was carrying far too much on her shoulders, especially after the loss of her husband. Her life became the center of gossip, with everyone in the village, from the oldest to the youngest, talking about her situation. In the eyes of many, she was just a young widow, raising her children alone, burdened by the responsibility of 3 brothers-in-law. They saw her as foolish, perhaps even helpless. Each time Huang went to the fields, she could feel the stares from the villagers, the whispers that followed her like shadows. Look at that little girl. How foolish she is. Her husband died and she still clings to his family. She can't even support herself, yet she's carrying the weight of 3 younger brothers. Truly, the most foolish woman in the world. These words weren't just fleeting comments. They felt like sharp knives, cutting into her heart every time she heard them. There were nights when she couldn't sleep. After a long, exhausting day in the fields, she would sit quietly in front of the oil lamp, her eyes fixed on the altar where her husband's picture still hung. She wondered, was she too foolish? Were all these sacrifices worth it? It wasn't just the gossip that weighed on her. Her own family, too, urged her to give up. One evening, her mother came to visit, sitting beside her with a worried expression. "Huang," she said gently, "you can't live like this forever, my dear. Why do you have to carry someone else's responsibility? Let me take care of your children, and you can leave those 3 brothers to fend for themselves." Her mother's words broke Huang's heart. She knew her mother loved her and only wanted her to find peace and happiness again. But as she looked into her mother's tear-filled eyes, they seemed to clash with the image of her husband, still vivid in her mind. Before losing him, she gripped his hand tightly. Her touch carried her final words. Huang, I know I've let you suffer your whole life, but my brothers and sisters, I can't close my eyes without knowing someone will care for them. That memory stayed with her, like an invisible thread, tightly pulling at her heart. She couldn't leave this house that had once been their home. She couldn't turn her back on the promises she had made, promises etched deep in her heart. Yet, she couldn't ignore the overwhelming questions that clouded her mind. If I leave, will my life be better? Do I have the right to be happy? The villagers' whispers grew louder and more judgmental. One day, when Fuang was busy at the market, two older women stood nearby, speaking deliberately loud enough for her to hear. They whispered cruelly, "This girl is truly crazy. Poor thing, she has young children, but she still takes care of her husband's 3 younger brothers. Why doesn't she just leave and start fresh? Let someone else help out. What's so noble about her sacrificing her life for them?" Huang felt the heat of anger rising in her chest, but she said nothing. She remained silent, carrying the sack of rice on her shoulder, walking quickly back home. Once inside, she collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't crying out of self-pity, but out of a deep, helpless sorrow. She couldn't abandon her husband's family, yet she couldn't go back to her own either. The harsh words from the villagers echoed in her ears, reminding her of how cold and indifferent the world could be. But amidst the confusion and emotional turmoil, the image of her husband appeared before her. His memory served as a reminder that her love and sense of duty were things she couldn't trade. The next morning, Fuang wiped her tears and stood tall, ready to face another day. She knelt before the altar, lit an incense stick, and whispered softly, "Everyone says I'm foolish. They say I'm stupid, but I can't give up. Even though this family cannot survive without your children, I will keep my promise to you, no matter how hard it gets." From that moment on, Fuang chose to ignore the gossip. Every time someone whispered about her, she just lowered her head and kept working. She no longer let their words hurt her. She reminded herself, if they don't live their lives and shoulder their responsibilities, how can they understand the determination I carry? This resolve not only helped her remain steadfast, but it also inspired her husband's brothers. Over time, she began to realize the depth of sacrifice she had made for her family. The rumors still stung, but they were no longer enough to break her. The strength of this rural woman's heart was unshakable. That afternoon, the sunlight burned like fire. Her young, fragile shoulders were bent under the weight of the day's work. After finishing the last row of grass, her hands continued to move quickly. Her young daughter sat under the shade of a tree at the edge of the field, playing with an old tin can. The sound of the can rattling in the wind was soothing, and for a moment, Fuang allowed herself to relax, believing her child was content. But then, a scream pierced the air, a cry of pain from her daughter. Fuang turned around, her legs frozen in terror as she saw the scene before her. Her daughter clung to her leg, her face contorted in pain, her eyes wide with fear. Top of form, bottom of form. Her panic surged within her. Her heart seemed to stop when she saw the snake bite on her child's leg. 2 small, distinct tooth marks, swollen and red. A hoarse, desperate cry escaped from her throat. Trembling, she tried to lift her child, but did so too hastily. In a frantic rush, Fuang sprinted toward the village, calling out for help, her voice trembling. She ran, her hands still shaking in distress. Each desperate cry seemed to tear her heart apart as she reached the village. Her calls for help made the neighbors spring into action. A kind neighbor quickly ushered her into a home, and together, they rode an old motorbike to the medical station. The wind whipped against her face, but it could not ease the tears that flowed freely down her cheeks. She clutched her child tightly, feeling completely helpless, as if a heavy weight was pressing on her chest. "Please don't scare me," she whispered, unsure if she was speaking to her daughter or to herself. The image of her baby's swollen leg and her child's agonizing cries only filled her with guilt. Why had she left her child alone? Why had she pushed herself to such extremes? She had forgotten to prioritize her child's safety. Upon reaching the medical station, the doctor quickly treated the wound and administered the necessary medicine. Thankfully, the venom was not lethal, as the snake wasn't extremely poisonous. But Huang couldn't stop crying as she looked at her daughter, still so small, lying in pain. Her daughter lay there, exhausted, eyes closed, but groaning from time to time, in pain. Huang sat by the hospital bed, holding her child's tiny hands, feeling the weight of her guilt deepening. When they finally returned home, Huang carefully placed her daughter onto the small bamboo bed. She watched as her little one slept peacefully, her heart heavy with the haunting image of what had happened. Her child, so innocent, so unaware of the burdens her mother carried. The little one could only cry when hungry and smile when held. Huang looked at her child and whispered, "What can I give you? How can I protect you from the world's burdens when I can barely protect myself?" Later, she sat in front of her husband's altar, holding a half-burnt incense stick, her eyes fixed on the photo. She questioned herself. Have I done something wrong? In my worry over my brothers, did I forget my daughter? Her heart was torn between responsibilities. I know my family needs me, but I can't let go of you, my dear. I made a promise to your father. How do I protect both you and our family without failing you? These questions plagued her through the night, but by morning, she had found her answer. She realized she could no longer ignore her responsibility to her daughter, no matter how difficult it became. From that day forward, she vowed to learn how to balance both, protecting her husband's family and keeping her child safe. She would not let any harm come to her daughter again. From the very next day, her daughter would always be by her side. Whether she worked in the fields or ran errands, Huang would carry her daughter on her back or keep her in a safe, visible spot. Huang even bought a small hammock, tied to a tree near the field, so she could keep her child close while working. During breaks, she would check on her daughter, soothing her and encouraging her to play. The incident in the field became the greatest lesson of Huang's life as a mother. She learned that a mother's love is an unshakable source of strength. It is the greatest force that allows her to keep pushing through hardships. She also realized that sacrifice does not mean neglecting the most important aspects of her life. It is not about giving up everything. It is about balancing love, protection, and care. This tragedy left an indelible mark on Huang's life. It wasn't just a fleeting moment of fear, it was a powerful awakening. It helped her understand that a mother's greatest responsibility is not merely sacrifice, but the ability to protect and love with wisdom and balance. From that point forward, her journey would no longer be simply about keeping promises. It would be a journey of both sacrifice and protection, of giving her children everything they needed while ensuring they never had to face danger alone. The struggle to support her husband was never just about providing for the family. It was also about preserving the sacred love she held as a mother. The image of a frail woman carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, yet still managing to protect her child with unwavering devotion, speaks volumes about a woman's strength and unrelenting love. This hardship didn't break her, it forged her into something even stronger. As she continued her journey after her husband's death, it wasn't just the battle for food and money she faced. She also had to raise her husband's 3 younger brothers, an arduous task in itself. Each of them had their own personalities and challenges, but Huang understood that her role was not just as a caregiver, but as a teacher, a mother, and often their only source of spiritual guidance. The oldest brother, the second brother, had his own struggles, falling in love at an early age, which led to a decline in his academic performance. Huang noticed a change in him. Once a diligent student, he began slacking off, staying out late, and hiding things from her. One day, Huang received a call from the school. Her younger brother's teacher informed her that his academic performance had dropped significantly. The reason? He had become distracted by a girl in his class, spending most of his time texting or going out with her. Huang gently confronted him that night when he came home. "What are you hiding from me?" she asked. He didn't respond, looking down in silence. She wasn't angry, just calm. "I never forbid you from making friends or having feelings, but you've forgotten something important. Your brother told you that you are the greatest hope of this family. You can't let distractions pull you away from that." Her words struck him like a sharp knife. Still, she didn't argue. She simply turned away, her heart heavy with grief. That night, Huang sat in front of the altar, a single incense stick, burning. Her heart ached as she whispered, "Honey, I've tried my best, but I don't know how to make him understand. If you were here, maybe things would be different." Unbeknownst to her, her younger brother overheard her sobbing in front of his brother's altar, a sight that would forever change his perspective. The realization of her sacrifices hit him hard. Slowly, he began to see the depth of her love and struggle, and how he had been ungrateful. A few days later, when Huang no longer mentioned the issue, her brother approached her one evening. He stood beside her, nervously fidgeting, and said, "I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. I'll try harder to study so you won't be sad anymore." Those simple words brought tears to Huang's eyes, and a weight lifted from her heart. From that moment on, the second younger brother became more responsible, returning to his studies with the diligence he once had. But the challenges didn't end there. The third brother, B.A., was a different case altogether. Unlike the older brother, who had lacked focus at times, B.A. was stubborn and often violent. One day, Huang received an urgent call from the school. Her heart sank when she learned that B.A. had beaten a classmate so badly that the boy's eyes were bleeding. The classmate's parents were furious and demanded compensation for medical bills, insisting that the school take strict action. Huang's heart shattered as she confronted B.A. "Do you understand what you've done? Do you realize the consequences?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. B.A. lowered his head, avoiding her gaze. His stubbornness, however, only made her pain deeper. After a long silence, Huang walked into the room where she took out the silver bracelet, the last gift her husband had given her. It was the only keepsake she had left. But now, she had no choice but to sell it to pay for the classmates' medical bills. She returned later, placing the money on the table in front of B.A. Her voice was hoarse, but steady as she said, "This was the last thing your brother left me." The weight of her words hung in the air, a painful reminder of the sacrifices she made, not just for her brothers-in-law, but for the memory of her late husband. In the silence that followed, B.A.'s heart began to soften. Huang's strength, her love, and her sacrifices were things he would not forget. for me, but I have to sell it for you. Do you ever think about me? Do you ever think about me if you don't? What else are you willing to change for me?" Those words struck like lightning. My brother lowered his head in silence. His face twisted in sorrow, and tears fell drop by drop. He whispered, "I'm sorry. I won't make you sad anymore." From that moment on, something shifted within him. He promised himself that he would never again do anything to cause his sister more pain. His youngest brother, who once wanted to quit school and start working, had always been the most gentle, the most affectionate. But deep down, he often felt guilty. He was burdened by the weight of the sacrifices she had made for him. One day, he said to her, "I want to drop out of school and work as a laborer. I don't want you to suffer anymore." Her heart ached when she heard those words. She knew he said them out of love, but she also knew that he didn't yet understand the value of an education. She looked at him gently but firmly. "Number, I can't let you drop out. It's not just what I want, but also what you need. This is what you've always wanted for yourself, too." Her decision was resolute. "If I drop out now, I'll regret it later, but I can't back down." In the end, her younger brother dropped out of school and moved to the city to work in construction, hoping he could ease the burden. But after 3 months of backbreaking work under the scorching sun, he returned home, his skin darkened, his hands scarred, and his face weary. He knelt before her, tears streaming down his face. "I was wrong. Working like that is so hard. I can't do it anymore. Please, let me go back to school." Seeing him kneel, his shirt soaked with sweat, my heart broke. I helped him up and embraced him. "It's okay, as long as you understand." From that day on, her brother returned to school with renewed determination. He studied harder than ever before. He finally realized that his sister's sacrifice wasn't to deny him a future. It was so he could build a life far better than the one she had lived. Those years were filled with challenges, but she never gave up. With patience, love, and sometimes painful decisions, she guided her brothers through it all. Her strength, her compassion, and her unshakable resolve shaped their lives. One by one, they matured. They not only understood her sacrifices, but also learned the meaning of responsibility, love, and hard work. Step by step, they transformed from stubborn, naive children into young adults with the will to work hard and achieve their goals. With time, her sacrifices no longer felt like a solitary effort. Her love, her actions, her teaching, these planted seeds in her brothers' hearts. Slowly, they began to understand the depth of her care and the great things she had done for them during those difficult days. Her efforts had not only worn down her body, but had also nurtured a deep, unbreakable bond of family love. That love held them together, even in the most challenging moments of life. As the years passed, the youngest brother grew into a more responsible, thoughtful young man. The older brother, who had once been reckless and distracted by love, now took his studies seriously. He no longer snuck out at night or hid things from his sister. Instead, he sat diligently at his desk, determined to improve. Every time he received a high score on a test, he would bring his homework home and proudly show it to his sister. The effort she had invested in them, the love she had poured into them, had borne fruit. And in their hearts, they knew they could never repay her, only honor her through their actions. This time, I scored 9 points in math, and I promise I will try harder to avoid making you sad in the future. Those words may seem simple, but to her partner, they are a beacon of hope during dark days. What I want more than anything is to see the children grow up with a sense of purpose, a vision for the future. The second brother, once a rebellious child, has now become more understanding. He no longer fights or causes trouble. Instead, he is finding joy in life. While studying and helping his sister, he once repaired a leaking roof with his own hands after a heavy rain. His hands, rough from hard work, shone with pride as he looked at his completed task. She didn't need to do anything because I could take care of her. I've struggled my whole life, but my youngest brother, after facing difficulties, worked hard not only to return to school, but also to outwork everyone else. He never forgot the lessons learned from his time as a worker. From that point on, he became one of the top students in his first grade class at night school, excelling in everything he did. One evening, as the whole family gathered around the dinner table, he shyly mentioned that his sister wanted to become an engineer one day. She dreamed of building a beautiful house, one that would no longer fall into disrepair. When his wife heard those words, she couldn't hold back her tears. It wasn't because of the promises made, but because she knew her efforts had not gone unnoticed. Her work had borne fruit. All three younger siblings not only changed their mindset, but they also began to achieve their first successes. Small, yet meaningful. The older sibling, in an important exam, won first place in advanced physics. The district's certificate of merit, displayed proudly on the wall, brightened the entire house when the teacher came to congratulate the second child. The second child, unable to hide her pride, smiled from ear to ear. Although she wasn't the best in academics, the second child was the one who supported her sister the most. Most of her time at home was spent learning how to fix things, from repairing the old door to strengthening the wobbly table. She worked tirelessly. When a Huang looked at the boy, she saw a reflection of her late husband in him, who had once been the one who wanted to drop out of school. Now, she's the best student in her class, acing every test. With high marks in hand, she left her test paper on the table one day, but didn't say a word. Her eyes, however, sparkled with determination. One evening, while the whole family was busy studying and working, she quietly said, "I won't let you down. I'll try harder so you don't have to worry about me in the future." Those small, sincere actions meant everything to A Huang. Despite the ongoing hardships, she felt that this family, though not related by blood, was truly an inseparable part of her heart. The challenges not only helped the children mature, but they also brought the family together every evening around the dinner table. No longer were they stubborn or difficult children. They had become companions, supporting one another through life's struggles. There was one particularly hard day when it rained heavily and the whole family sat together. My older sister spoke up then, saying, "If I succeed in the future, I will take care of you and your daughter too. You are like a second mother to us." When A Huang heard those words, she could say nothing. She just smiled. She knew deep down that her efforts, her tears, and her sacrifices had not been in vain. These three children, who she had raised as her own, were now her family, the reason she continued to live and endure the tough days. The small achievements they had made were the sweet fruits of sacrifices on both sides, but most importantly, they represented the bond of love that united the family. Through all the difficulties, this small family had become a unified whole, where everyone knew how to love and appreciate each other. A Huang, the resilient eldest sister, realized that staying and continuing this challenging journey was the right decision. As time passed, the quiet sacrifices of the second sister were rewarded by her kindness and perseverance. The transformation of three brothers-in-law who once were immature children into successful, responsible individuals, is a story of love, sacrifice, and gratitude. These young men, once stubborn and reckless, have now become pillars of strength, forever grateful to their sister-in-law, who selflessly raised them with immense love and dedication. The eldest brother, now a doctor, was once swept away by youthful impulses, but his perseverance has led him to success. The day he received his acceptance letter to medical school was filled with tears of joy and relief. It was a moment that validated all the sacrifices and struggles. During his college years, he worked part-time jobs, saving every penny to ease his family's burden. Upon receiving his first salary, he sent it back home with a heartfelt handwritten letter. "This is my first salary. Please don't refuse it." He understood the weight of their struggles, and every month he sent money back to help not only his sister, but also care for the rest of the family. During holidays, he would return home, bringing small gifts, his heart full of pride for his sister and family. The second brother, a successful construction engineer, and the third brother, once rebellious, are now both thriving in their careers. They carry with them the lessons of hard work, determination, and the deep gratitude they owe to their sister-in-law. The third brother, with his newfound success, not only excelled in his career, but also took it upon himself to give back to the family. When his company received the first bonus from a major project, he didn't use it for personal indulgence, but brought it back to his hometown. He told his sister, "This money will rebuild our old house. Don't worry, I'll handle everything." True to his word, he dedicated an entire summer to personally supervise the construction of a new, spacious home. For their family, this house was more than just a building. It symbolized love, gratitude, and the fulfillment of promises. The youngest brother, once impulsive, has become a small businessman, owning a chain of home appliance stores. He continues to support his family, ensuring his niece will have the opportunity to attend college in the city. Years passed, and the brothers-in-law returned home for a family reunion. On the altar of their late brother, they lit incense and bowed their heads in remembrance. It was a simple gathering, yet deeply emotional. The three brothers-in-law turned to their sister-in-law and in choked voices said, "Sister, we are so grateful to you. Without you, we wouldn't be here today. You are not only our sister-in-law, but also our second mother." Tears filled their eyes as they held her hands tightly. Huang, their sister-in-law, looked at her children with blurred vision, unsure of what to say. She simply nodded, overwhelmed with happiness. The youngest brother continued, "Your daughter is our daughter now. We promise to take care of her, so you don't have to worry. You have suffered enough for us." In that moment, the love that bound them was undeniable. It shone brightly, erasing all the hardships they had faced. They were no longer just a family by blood. They were a living testament to the power of love, sacrifice, and gratitude. Seeing her children grow up to be successful and supportive filled Huang's heart with peace. All the sacrifices she made were worth it. Though the path was filled with challenges, the ultimate reward was a united, loving family. She had not only raised them, but had planted the seeds for a future that would ensure their well-being and success. At the end of the reunion, the children promised to never let go of her hand. They would be there for her through every hardship, with radiant smiles and unwavering support. However, just as Huang began to find peace, her health began to deteriorate. Persistent headaches and dizziness led her to the hospital, where doctors gave the shocking diagnosis: a blood clot in her brain that required immediate surgery. The doctor warned that if not treated quickly, her life would be at risk. Upon hearing this, the three brothers-in-law didn't hesitate. They dropped everything and joined their cousin in taking Huang to the best hospital in the city for urgent treatment. The eldest brother, now a doctor, reminded them all, "She sacrificed her life for us. Now, it's our turn to take care of her." During Huang's hospital stay, the three brothers took turns by her bedside, supporting her. The once carefree young men had matured into responsible, loving individuals. They knew they owed their entire lives to her, and they would not let her face this challenge alone. Please rest assured, the treatment is all there. But we are deeply concerned about the third sister, the strong yet quiet construction engineer who stays by her side, taking care of her every meal and every sleep. She quietly speaks as she makes the bed. To us, she is like a second mother. No one else has a bond like this. I have every right to let you suffer even more the day your partner enters the operating room. The three younger siblings waited anxiously outside, their faces filled with worry. When the doctor finally announced that the surgery was a success, all three sighed in relief. They entered the room together, looking at their sister with weak smiles, yet their hearts were overflowing with joy after the surgery. Afterward, Huang began to recover, though her health was never the same as before. But she found peace in seeing her younger brothers, now grown and successful. The new house built by the third brother stood as a testament to their hard work and unity, always filled with laughter and warmth. Huang's daughter smiled in gratitude, thankful for the support that helped her overcome life's hardships and build her own career. Every time Huang visits her mother, she embraces her brothers, thanking them for their unwavering love and support. They didn't just promise to care for their sister, they also made it a point to regularly gather as a family. Every occasion spent around the dinner table, they shared stories, laughed about old memories, and felt the bond that nothing could ever break. One afternoon, Huang sat in a chair on the front porch, watching her grandchildren play under the warm sunlight. Her hands, once rough and calloused from years of labor, could now rest. The painful memories of her late husband and the difficult days had transformed. They were no longer a source of sorrow, but pride, symbols of love, sacrifice, and unwavering determination. When her three younger brothers came to visit, they sat beside her, gazing at the spacious house they had helped build. Today, she was not just their sister-in-law, but their second mother. "Rest assured, we'll take care of everything," the third sister assured her. "You don't have to worry about anything else." The other woman smiled quietly, tears of happiness silently falling. Despite all the hardships, she had now found peace. The years of struggle had passed, leaving behind a close-knit, loving family. This small yet resilient woman had sowed the seeds for a bright future. Now, in her later years, she could peacefully enjoy time with her children, grandchildren, and younger brothers, all of whom considered her their second mother. Her sacrifices not only led to their success, but also created a legacy of love and familial strength. This bond went beyond mere affection. It was a deep-rooted connection that made them all feel cherished. Huang's story inspired everyone around her, even the neighbors who once criticized her, calling her foolish for taking on a burden that didn't belong to her, could not help but admire her. They would often say, with admiration in their eyes, "Ms. Huang is truly a blessing to Duke." She had raised her three younger brothers, and they still loved and cared for her, treating her as they would their own mother. Her biological parents, who had once advised her to give up, could not hide their pride whenever they saw their daughter being cared for by her in-laws. They would nod, saying, "Our child made the right choice. She sacrificed her youth, but in return, she has a warm and happy family. That is something to be proud of." These respectful looks weren't just a reward for Fuang. They were the clearest proof that her sacrifices had not been in vain. The recognition from both her family and the community affirmed the profound value of the love and resilience she had shown all her life. Fuang's story is a powerful lesson about love, sacrifice, and resilience. A small woman, she overcame countless hardships to protect and raise her husband's brothers, shaping them into respectful and successful people. Her life not only changed their futures, but it also left a legacy of familial love, affection, and gratitude. Through her story, we learn that love is the greatest force. It can turn the seemingly impossible into reality. Family isn't just where we were born, it's where we devote our hearts, just as Fuang did for her husband's family. Patience and faith in the future can help us overcome any challenge, no matter how difficult. If you feel the message from this story, share the love and gratitude for family with those around you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspirational stories. Join us in building a community that radiates love and faith in life. Thank you for following us.